everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Ayiko, and today we are privileged to be joined by three fantastic panelists to discuss racial injustice and how the church can respond to the topic surrounding overcoming racial injustice in the UK. So I'll just let my panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Pete.
Hi, well, great to be with you folks. My name is Pete, pastor at Destiny Church in Edinburgh. Been in my mid-40s, and I've been pastoring here in Edinburgh for 22 years. And it's a very international and diverse church, full of people from different nationalities, and also I'm thrilled to have great leaders from different ethnicities as well.
Yeah. And we'll move on to Baile.
Hi, my name is Baile Adeoti. I'm the pastor, one of the pastors in Destiny Glasgow, and I'm also a social entrepreneur.
Fantastic. And Andrew.
Hello everyone. So my name is Andy Brady. I'm one of the pastors at Destiny Glasgow. I'm also the acting dean of Destiny College, and it's a real privilege and pleasure to be here today.
Fantastic. So thank you all for joining us. It's been an incredibly overwhelming 3 weeks. I think we can all agree. The follow-up to George Floyd's death, some other happenings in America, and also the incredibly overwhelming response, an emotional response here in the UK. And we'd just like to chat about responding to racial injustice, okay? Now, obviously, all of you have mentioned that you are leaders within the church and also out with your church buildings. And ever since this thing happened with George Floyd, this tragic event with George Floyd, all three of you have had incredibly passionate and consistent responses towards what's been happening racially, and I was just going to start the discussion there. Can you tell us what your response has been and what inspired this incredibly passionate response? And we'll just start with the same order. Let's start with Pete.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't a hard thing to respond to. I mean, I'm a white guy, and so the difficulty is white people feel, okay, can I say anything about this? Who am I to say? But actually, I'm a human being, so I believe this is a human issue, that human beings have to speak up for human beings. And as I said, I'm a pastor of a church, a very large church with people from a wide range of backgrounds. So some of my best friends are from are black, some of them are from Asian backgrounds. So for me, I've never understood how anyone could have any prejudice against someone because of the colour of the skin. But one of the things I'm aware of as well is I don't know how that feels. So but in spending time with precious friends from African backgrounds or British-born African backgrounds, just to hear their stories and to be impacted by actually how they felt when certain things happened. And by the way, I mean, you know this, everyone's got a story. It's not like 1 in 10 people have experienced this. It's not. My experiences, 10 out of 10 have experienced either overt or definitely subconscious racism in some form or another. And just hearing the stories gives you a huge empathy. Yeah. So I think some people who it doesn't affect are looking on thinking, what's the fuss? Yeah. For me, I'm not thinking that, because I know people and I have a circle. I'm not in a white bubble. Yeah. Some of my best friends are non-white, and I know how it affects them.
Thank you. All right, thanks for that, Pete. Baile, would you like to tell us about your response and what inspired that incredibly passionate response?
My response has been, as a black woman and someone growing up with a black community and being in Glasgow with a black community surrounding me. So I've been hearing lots of stories from people of all ages, including youth who've just left school but have been subjected to racism in their school and nothing's been done about it, and then even just the impact that it's having. So it's people connecting with racism on a very raw level. An incident with a 7-year-old 2 weeks ago before this happened, with getting hit in the playground and the parents just looking. So, and now she's too scared to go out into the park. She's too scared to even walk in her neighbourhood. So to hear all these raw stories 2 weeks ago, and then to hear what's happening in America, it is really affecting the black community in Glasgow, and it's also bringing up their past experiences and even current experiences that they're going through. So it has been, I guess, an emotionally challenging time for everybody, but it's also time for people just to share their experiences, but also look on how we can move forward together and provide solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Andrea? I know you have a very unique connection to the whole thing. Can you tell us a bit about that and your response to?
Good choice of words, Aiko. Unique. I like that one. Again, like both Pete and Bailey, I pastor a church with a very diverse background. We have people, we've got black people, Asian, Indian, Filipino, white, with people from all over the world and from here in the UK. And when things like racial injustice happen anywhere, and in the world that we're living in, with technology filming 24/7, it's going to affect everyone concerned. So when this one in itself happened with George Floyd, it made me look at my own family. So I'm married to a black woman. Before we got married, I already had a child in a previous relationship. My son AJ, and AJ's white. But when me and Grace, my wife, got married, she became AJ's mum. And the way that Grace's family have welcomed him in, so AJ is the first grandson of Grace's family. There is no even there's not a second thought. It's just he is the first grandson, and we're not allowed to tell the other kids. But the oldest is the favourite according to the gran. But I'm not. I'll not say that publicly. Okay, so that needs to get edited out. But so I've seen what it's like as a white man to be welcomed in with such love to a black family. And since we've been married, we've had another son, Nathaniel. And Nathaniel, he's a mixed kid, but Nathaniel's a black child. He'll grow up knowing of who he is. So probably quite unique to a lot of people. I have a white son and a black son. And when this happened, and I seen the diverse and mixed responses to George Floyd's murder, but I just wanted to before I carry on, the murder in itself was horrific, but it's the issue behind it is the real problem. And it made me think, will my youngest son Nathaniel be treated differently to my oldest son AJ? Now the two of my brothers, the blood, if you were to see them together, I find it harder to find a closer love than when I see those two playing with one another. So it really hurt home. Am I raising my son up in a world where he's going to be treated differently because of the colour of his skin? Now, like Pete, I'm a white man. I'll never fully understand what it is to face racism in that way. But for the sake of my family, for the sake of those who I'm leading, I can't stay silent about it. So that provoked the response at that time. But just as a human being, whether I'm white or not, racism is evil. So if we don't speak out against it, then it's almost like we're just allowing it to continue to happen, and that can't be the case.
Yeah. Thanks for that, guys. So just to follow up on that, regarding the response, I've seen an incredible response last week regarding the church response towards racial injustice. And it looks like a two-sided coin to me. On one side, people are saying, how should I respond to racial injustice? And the other side of the coin, people are saying, the church should respond, and the church should respond in this way. Have any of you experienced that either side of the coin? And what are your thoughts on that? Let's just go around again. Pete, please help us start this off.
Yeah, I think the response is first of all going to be personal. I think you've got to, like with all things, before you jump on, they need to change or they need to change, you need to first look at yourself. And how am I treating people? How do I view people? And while I don't think there would ever be conscious racism from me, I just don't get that. I would never do that. Could there be a thing whereby, without realizing it, I'm being prejudiced in the way I'm acting? And there's a subconsciousness there. So I think it's good just to ask yourself that question. And the answer might be no, but I think you've got to be humble enough to be able to do a bit of soul searching. And I think that's a good thing. That's what humility does.
True.
And we want to be people who can change and become more like Jesus. And I think in terms of church-wide response, I think, Andy, you made a comment that, silence is almost a stance in itself. I think there's a danger here. So I think some people are feeling the pressure to respond, so they just respond, so they're seen to respond.
Yeah.
And it's a typical kind of celebrity thing.
Yeah.
So the celebrity, and then if they don't respond, they're blamed for not responding.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bit shallow, and it's a bit judgmental, and people are, they're, oh, look how prejudiced they are, and basically that in itself has been prejudice against people who don't speak out.
Yeah.
So I don't mean that we should speak out just so we are seen to be speaking out. But my feeling on any issue, especially something like this, when it's affecting people's lives, the church has to speak out and has to be a voice and has to be clear. And actually, if you look in our country, in a few centuries ago, William Wilberforce, it was his passion from God for truth that caused him to fight against the slave trade in his time. And for years, year after year, he brought that bill before Parliament opposing slavery. And he was doing it at a time when many of the politicians in the House in London had their own slaves. So, he was fighting a losing battle, but he did it with conviction. And that conviction came from the Bible. So from the word go, Christianity has been crystal clear in this subject. I know some atheists would argue, Christianity, many people have used the Bible to justify slavery and so on. And I've heard those arguments. But actually, that's a misreading of the text. What Paul and others were writing in the New Testament about was how you treat with dignity if you happen to have slaves. He wasn't saying anything about positively or negatively about slavery. He was saying that if you happen to have people, and the application today would be for employers, how you treat employees. The Bible is crystal clear that human beings are worthy of worth and value. In fact, in the Old Testament, there was a protection in place, the year of Jubilee, for people who might be found themselves in a place of economic hardship and they had to serve in order to get money. There was a moment of Jubilee when they could be liberated and they could be economically restored again. And so God's always built into it a sense of justice and a sense of equality within the systems that be. And so to be a church that speaks out with a crystal clear voice, and the crystal clear voice goes right for me back to the book of Genesis, where it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, that God has created us in the image of God. We're image bearers, and therefore, and it was Martin Luther King that was the basis for him for his civil rights movement.
Yeah. And
his passion was that because we've been created in the image of God, we have equality, and there should be value and worth attributed to a human being. And for me, that's the deeper issue. It's not just about black people, and it's not just about white people. It's about human beings. And when you understand we've been created in the image of God, surely you would be passionate about anything that affects a human being, whether it be a poor person. Wow, that person's been created in the image of God. That's why we help the poor, because we've got this value, you've been created in the image of God. That's why I get upset when I see the abortion laws changing and human beings are being aborted even for the birth. Why? Why am I upset with that? Yeah. Because they've been created in the image of God. Why do we care for the elderly at their last moments in life? Because they've been created. And why do I care passionately for the black community who for years have experienced various forms of racism, either overt or covert? Because they've been created in the image of God. So for me, it would be a hypocrisy to just jump on board this bandwagon and then not equally feel passionate about other issues that affect human beings. For me, it's one big message that because we've been created in the image of God, we have value and worth. And that for me is the foundation and the driving force behind it.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So you're saying it's just consistent. You're just being consistent. The church is just being consistent in.
Absolutely. It's not jumping on a bandwagon. It's not, or everyone else is messaging about it. If you actually look at my social media posts over the years, you'll see I've been equally passionate about issues of injustice to do with babies being aborted, or about injustice in terms of poverty issues. I am, for me, this is about we've been created in the image of God. And right now, actually, is a moment of possible change for the black community. And I feel let's put our foot in the accelerator and speak up on that one, because this is such an important issue. If it's important to you, it's really important to me.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Pete. What about you, Bailey? I know you caught some heat from me last week. What do you think about it?
I think just going back to what Pete is saying, the church has to be mindful that if they are responding to this, they're responding to it with consistency. It's not just jumping on the bandwagon for something and then forgetting about it, but it's addressing the issue and also being part of the change. In the Old Testament, and the church was the ecclesia. It was the assembled group of people, the summoned group of people who would make the decisions. That's where everyone went, to the ecclesia. So it's for the church to drive things forward and to be the change and to be the voice, but it depends how each church is going to react as a body in their response. So I think it's also to be mindful, if you are going to make a response as a church, then you have to consistently follow through. So checking up with people maybe who've been affected, whether it's in your congregation, in their workplaces and things, and just making sure that their lives are moving on, their lives are flourishing, and they're not stuck in that place. And also mindsets are being changed and hearts are being transformed too. It's an important thing that the heart is being transformed, the mind is being renewed, and it's even maybe changing language that we need to address within ourselves. But as Pete was saying, which is the very right point, you need to look at yourself first. I've looked at myself, I've looked at my heart and thought, okay, Lord, is there anything in my heart that I need to sort out before I can post about this? Is there issues that I need to address? Have I got biases that I need to address too? And then just following through with that and taking those conversations forward.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Andy? Have you experienced either one of these elements to do with how should I respond? Why should I respond this way?
Well, I think first and foremost, when it's something that involves people, there are always going to be some say you get it right and others say that you get it wrong. You're never going to please everybody, and we're not here to please everybody. Just echoing what both Pete and Bailey are saying, we are here to bring God's voice into the situation. So it's not just responding and jumping on to anything. It's no, this is what God says, because He loves people. He has made a way for all people to be saved. He's made a way for the Jews and Gentiles, which was the Jewish faith and the rest of the world, to come together as one. So when people in the community are hurting, and the church is there to influence the community, the church is there to reach the community, then we must make a response. So I found that there has been people who have said certain churches haven't did this, or other churches haven't done that, or you've been silent on this point, been silent on that point. But I think every church has to take their time to go back to hear what God's saying in the situation, and not just bring an opinion, but bring God's word into the situation. So for me, we see as a church, we can agree that there's a problem, but we see it differently from the world. So not only do we want justice, because we do, not only do we want hearts to be healed, we do. We want to see people reconciled to God. That is whether you're black, white, whatever background you come from, we want to see you reconciled to God so that you can experience true love, so you can experience true grace, and so you can have eternal healing. But we have also been called to be a voice, so we must bring truth into every situation. And I think as a church, that's what we aim to do. Now, we won't always get it right. We're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's why I'm so thankful for God's grace, because I say something wrong every single day of the week, and I thank God for His grace. But so that is as a church. But personally speaking, I had to look into myself. I had to go into myself and go, okay, why do I think this way, or why do I say these things? Because I would never have considered myself a racist person, but as I've looked into myself, there's inbuilt things that I have learned, whether consciously or subconsciously, which have racial bias. But I had to be humble enough to look into myself and say, you know what, before I can educate anyone else, I've got to educate myself. And before I can voice what I believe God would say into this situation, I have to see what God is saying to me first. So I'm not a hypocrite. So I'm not. I'm speaking with integrity. So I think education is key. Soul searching is key. We may never change the entire world all at one go, but we can change ourselves and allow God to work in us to change our hearts and renew our minds. And if every person in the world gets changed one person at a time, then eventually the whole world will be a better place.
Beautiful, thank you. So clearly the three of you are on the front line of this. I want you to see, are you aware of any barriers that are hampering the church response in discussions and finding resolutions? Are you aware of any barriers preventing you from responding to racial injustice or people feeling incredibly overwhelmed at the moment? I know of several, but I wanted to see, firstly, if you guys have experienced any barriers in your response at all.
The only one I would comment on is I've heard, because one of the things I do is I work with other pastors as well, and I host a pastors' prayer gathering in Edinburgh every Thursday morning. So I'm connecting with a lot of pastors in Edinburgh, and sometimes white pastors genuinely feel, what can I say? I mean, they almost feel, who am I to speak into it? And the point so I think that's a barrier. I think it's in their heads. And as I said the point earlier, this is a human being issue. And if you're a human being, you qualify to speak in this. And so I guess, actually, my guess is the black community are crying out for white people to speak on the subject. Is that not the point? Yes. You don't just want it to be the voice of the black people speaking it. You want to hear white people saying, this is what we believe in this. So I think there's a barrier in white people's minds that, who am I to speak with passion on this subject? You know, I haven't experienced this racism. But so I've just been encouraging pastors, you know, first of all, be vocal on it, because the black community wants you to be. And then the other encouragement I've been, I think a barrier that often is, and again, it's not, I don't feel it's a barrier in my life, but a barrier that some people in the white community have is they're in a white bubble. They literally don't know any people from another community. And for me, this issue is a no-brainer. We need to speak about this. Why? Because I've got friends who are black. I've got friends who are Asian. I've got friends who are from different backgrounds. And therefore, I've got to speak up because I love them. I know them. I understand their journeys. But for some people, there's an ongoing problem, is that they went to a white school, they hung out with white people. And I think it was Andrew Owen made the comment that the most segregated day in America is a Sunday. And you've got black people going to black churches and white people going to white churches. The most segregated, I mean, of all days, that should be the day when heaven and earth happens, where people from every tribe, nation, language, and tongue. So I think one of the barriers is people in their own enclaves. But by the way, I am so passionate about international church, because my feeling is that, that's what I see in Revelation 7. I see from every nation in heaven. And I think, isn't it great that, I know Destiny Glasgow, Destiny Edinburgh, we're very international churches. I just love that. It feels like heaven and earth. But the good thing about that is this, just that in itself is a testimony to the world, but also that in itself is an education within itself. That my views are impacted by being exposed to people from different backgrounds, and it happens both ways. So while I understand why people want to, for example, go to churches full of people just like them, I understand why that's more comfortable. I think there's something more kingdom, more exciting to me about being overtly internationalist churches and celebrating that and loving that. And not just international, but also churches for the rich and the poor. Poor people can learn so much from the rich people, and the rich people can learn so much from the poor people. The black people learn so much from the white people, and the white people can learn so much from the black people. And the cross-fertilization of cultures is just an enriching experience. So I think one of the barriers is people literally have been in bubbles and they haven't been exposed to the bigger. And I think church is a great place where that shouldn't happen. But sadly, some churches are segregated overtly.
So you're saying this demarcation is not that it's a demarcation, but this segregation, like you said, really. But I wanted to speak that, Pastor Pete, it's not just in the white community, the black community as well sometimes are in a bubble. I've noticed that sometimes when, you know, we for safety, for the lack of we think sometimes we may not understand our culture, so we just tend to stick together to preserve ourselves almost. And then when it comes to issues like this, it's almost like you look around and you have the representation of another race and of another tribe to discuss these things and to, you know, help bring understanding to this. But I think also it happens in different ways. It happens in professional worlds as well. For example, my friend who is a medic sent me a message saying, is this okay for me to share this particular tweet on my Twitter? It was something to do with challenging a mindset and a prejudice. And she said to me, I don't feel comfortable putting this on because I know that my colleagues who are predominantly white are going to see this. And after a bit of back and forth, she said to me, I don't even know why I feel this. Why do I feel this discomfort? Why do I feel this perceived discomfort on their side? So it is actually a barrier. People are afraid to cross the demarcation in professional worlds as well. And it's incredibly a big barrier, quite honestly. What about you, B? I know that you are a businesswoman. I know that, you know, you mix in different circles, events, minority groups as well. Have you experienced any barriers at all?
What I'm hearing a lot at the moment is people being encouraged by the voices that are rising up, but also being wary that maybe this is just a phase, and what's going to happen 6 months down the line. Will people still be talking about this movement and equality and about Black lives and Black people and the equality that Black people should have? So that's what I've been hearing at the moment, and just voicing that, and also being scared about posting things because they are worried that people are going to see them as too extreme and forcing this issue when it's been an issue that they've experienced throughout their whole life, and they're just having the voice now or the ability to say, actually, this is what I think. Yes, I can relate to that does affect me but I always just brush it off like water off a duck's back, but it does affect me when you do say that. And so they're still scared about saying these things because they're afraid that they'll offend somebody or they'll be taken in the wrong way.
Yeah. That's true. And I have to agree. Sometimes we just don't know, like Pete said, what to say or where to begin with the whole thing. You know, we risk saying the wrong thing altogether. So that I have just that challenge. How have you helped them? Have you said anything to help them navigate that challenge? Do you think there's a way they can navigate that challenge?
I think what I've been saying to them is to have hope, and to also be able to start having conversations with people that you trust first of all, and that you can discuss and maybe have those uncomfortable conversations. I've been encouraged this week by a story about Nelson Mandela. When he came out of prison in 1994, he had a choice of forcing retribution for everything that happened to him and happened to South Africa in general. But he chose hope, and he had a vision of the future for South Africa. So he brought forward the Truth and Reconciliation Council, and they had those uncomfortable conversations, but everyone also had a choice of leaving those hurts in that courtroom, and as soon as they stepped out, to move forward and to work together and progress the country together. So that's something I'm encouraging people to do, to say, embark on this adventure, this opportunity with hope. Embark on it knowing that there will be a change, that you're not just using your voice just that it can be heard for this moment, but use it so that it can be heard for the future, and use it so that it can be changed for your children and their children.
Thank you. And you, Andy?
Many barriers. I think there's barriers of ignorance, barriers of guilt, barriers of hurt, even barriers of hate. There's spiritual barriers as well that I've come across, and there's also people, they want to be comfortable in their life, so they don't want to come out of their comfort zone. But the world won't change in your comfort zone. If we're going to change the world, we're going to have to be inconvenienced and be willing to step out even when we're scared. Jesus didn't say that he would take the fear away. He said he's given us faith to overcome the fear. The challenges are going to come, the offences are going to come. But what I've found is, for me, the way I've combat that is there's two things. There's education. So for me, I think everyone should educate themselves on what the Bible says. Get to know the Bible, get to know what the truth of this eternal word is, so that we can apply it to our situations. Educate yourselves by having conversations like this. I've witnessed both sides of the bubble, where I've got many black friends, black families, but I've had the privilege of being involved in the inner circle of their conversations, and I've seen that they find it hard to talk about these issues to their white friends or their white pastors. And the other side, my white friends and white leaders, where they don't understand, so they don't feel like they have a place to speak. So conversations will help educate. Educate yourself on what's going around, like what's happening in cultures. I've heard a lot of people say this is an American problem. It's a world problem. We may be part of a local church, but we're also part of a universal church. So what happens here affects there, and what happens there affects here. So I think education is key. But I also think there is a big spiritual battle, and you can't educate spirits. Like, there is an evil spirit behind racism. So in order to combat that, you must take authority over that. But you can only take authority over any spirit when you come under the authority of Jesus Christ and speak his name into the situation. And I think people don't want to look at the spiritual side. It's easier not to look at that. But there is an evil spirit behind racism that has been here for centuries. And yes, we must educate ourselves, but we must continue to come to the cross of Christ. Come under his grace, come under his authority, so we can speak with his authority and rid this world of the evilness of racism. So yeah, many barriers, but I think now people are being forced to look at them, and it doesn't matter where you stand, you can't ignore that this is happening right now. And like I said before, we may not rid the world of racism in our lifetime, but we must do our best to leave a legacy that helps the generations to come.
Lovely. You spoke about the guilt barrier. Could you expand a bit more on that? The context of the guilt.
There's, if you look at history, there's you don't have to look very far in history to see white people oppressing black people. So that comes with a feeling of guilt. Whether you it could have been your grand's gran or your granddad's granddad. It could be generations. But knowing that you may, being a white man and having family or ancestors, your lineage that have been maybe slave owners or who have oppressed black people, that builds up feelings of guilt inside that people aren't comfortable with. Or when you look into yourself and you start to see your broken, sinful nature, and see that maybe there was times in your life where you've said racial words, or times in your life where you have been racist, or you've discriminated against different people, it brings up feelings of guilt. We all discriminate in some way or another. But I think, like Pete said at the beginning, we must humbly look within ourselves and teach ourselves first. So I had a conversation with AJ, my oldest son, and because he was asking, Dad, what will I do if someone attacks Nathaniel? Like, so AJ's, he's very protective of his little brother. So I was like, well, don't get violent, son, right? Let's not, because he was getting really emotional and built up. And he said to me, Dad, how can people treat Nathaniel differently? How can people just judge him like that? But I had to get him to look at himself. So AJ really loves his clothes. Like, he really loves his designer brands. So I said to him, is that you're walking down the street and you see someone with a certain tracksuit on, or if you see someone with a certain jumper or a certain pair of trainers, you've already judged them in your head. Before you even say anything, in your mind you've already judged them for what they're wearing. Now it's the same when people start to be racist towards people of other colour. Whether they say the words or whether they even believe that it's true, there's a subconscious discrimination already there. So unless we're willing to look at that, it will never leave us. So I think that is the guilt that comes, because when you look at that and you think, wait a minute, I have been an offender. at some point. That's a hard pill to swallow, and many people just might not want to swallow it.
Yeah, that's true. That is a good segue into one of the barriers I was actually going to bring up specifically. One of the barriers I realized is hampering the discussions last week is the emotional barrier. It's an incredibly emotional time, and it's on a spectrum. On one side, there's despair. Some people don't think a day is ever going to come where, they will be free. Their kids won't be taunted. And on the other side, people are incredibly angry that people don't understand what they're going through. People don't have insight. People don't want to change, and that this is happening. So people are incredibly angry, and it's affecting the response. It's affecting their response. It's affecting how people respond to them. And I think that this is one that I think we need to talk about. How can we overcome this emotional barrier across the spectrum, from anger to hopelessness to despair? What are your thoughts on that, Pastor Pete?
Yeah, well, first of all, the emotional barrier, I get that, because, again, chatting to some people from the Black community, I hadn't realised this until I'd actually talked to them. There is they've lived with an acceptance of this is how things are for so many years. They they will, in fact, they've been told, if they've grown up in Britain, they've been told, listen, you might be treated differently. The parents have forewarned them that this is going to happen. So they've almost grown to have this acceptance of this kind of low-level racism thing. And then occasionally, there'll be the occasional incident of something happens, and it's not low-level, it's overt racism. And so this is building up. It's like a dam building up in people's hearts. And then something like George Floyd happens. And it's like someone's just burst the dam.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing it's like there's a movement, there's a groundswell. And with that movement and with that groundswell, there's a sense of hope. For some people, it's at last people are hearing. Yes. I've been feeling this for years. I've just learned to accept it, but actually, no, why should I accept it? Yeah. And there's this sense of partly anger's coming out. There's a lot of hope coming out as well. Yeah. And also part of the sometimes the judgmentalism is, why are you not speaking about this? Because it means so much to the people that they're getting on people who aren't speaking about it, because literally it means everything to. So I get that. I completely get that. Mm-hmm. I just think with all of us, though, we've got to manage our emotions really well, because what has concerned me, and I'm sure it's concerned all of you, is when, for example, protests, and I think protesting is absolutely fantastic. We need to have voice, we need to protest, we need to demonstrate, that sort of thing. That's part of living in a free world. That's part of freedom of speech. That is absolutely essential. But what happens is when protests flip into riots, all of a sudden, the crazy thing is that actually undermines the whole process. And I'm sure you all experience this frustration, like, come on, don't go there, don't do the looting, because as soon as you get looting, you think that's nothing to do with George Floyd, that's nothing to do with, that in itself is an injustice. So this is what happens when human beings get involved. And as human beings, we're all sinners. And so we just got to be highly aware. I find if I'm angry about something, I typically don't make the best decisions. If I can just let it settle. Just remember Jesus when he went into the temple. He saw the people buying and selling. He didn't suddenly lash out. He said, he observed. He came back the next day with a whip. It's like, I've slept in it. I've decided the appropriate response is I'm going to kick them out of here, right? The thing is, that wasn't uncontrolled kind of rage. That was, I have considered that this is the most appropriate way to express God's passion in this moment. So I just think, I get the high level of emotions. I totally get it, because a dam has been burst. They've been living with this for years and years and years. This is a moment of hope, and this is also a moment of anger. Yeah. And I see that in my Black friends. I'm seeing some of them, they're really affected by it negatively. Some of them are really affected by it in terms of hope. Mm-hmm. And it's totally valid. And I think everyone's just got a responsibility for how we handle our emotions and how we protest in a way that's clear, succinct, strong, and credible. And I think everyone needs to do it. Yeah. Just to say something about hope as well, I just want to throw this in here because I realise this. There's been a lot of research into Generation Z. Gen Z is the kind of under 25s generation. Mm-hmm. the teenagers, like Andy, yeah. So like teenagers like Andy. But the Gen Z, one of the hallmarks of Gen Z is they're going to be the most diverse and unbiased generation this world has seen. So there's hope right there, folks. That's the future generation. It's typically a generalization, but in other words, racism, I'm hoping in this younger generation, because when I grew up in Scotland, I grew up in Glasgow, in my school, there was no one who was black. No one. I didn't know anyone who was black. But today, if you're in a primary school in Glasgow, you've got lots of black people in the class. And so all of a sudden, that's a very different approach to life. When AJ's approach to life will be hugely different because of his brother. And so growing up in a more diverse, because of immigration, there's a huge diversity on our doorstep. And I think that helps change things. But the other thing I'd like to say, and it flips the other way, I think what the black community has brought to Britain is gold. It is absolute gold. The values I see in my black friends are exceptional values. Deep spirituality, deeply passionate, incredibly committed to community. I mean, British people just kind of, what is community? It doesn't exist. They don't care for their older people. They don't know their neighbours in the same stairwell as them. That's not the black community. The black community, they love eating, they love community, they value family, they value the aged, they're deeply spiritual, massively passionate. Britain needs the black community. So my encouragement actually is influence Britain. Because every ethnicity has a God-given trait in it. And the God-given trait in the Africans is these amazing characteristics I've just described. Let those shine really brightly and infiltrate society with those values. And so I just want to throw those two things out there. That I think the generation that's rising up is a bit less stuck in its ways. I think it's much more diverse and open to different people. And B, I think the contribution the black community can make is absolutely massive.
Fantastic. That was very robust. Either two of you have any experiences you want to share on the emotional tip?
Yeah. I think what I've been hearing back from those who have been speaking to us, none of our black community are looking for an answer per se. They're just looking to be heard. If you look to Jesus, he did have the answers, but he also met people where they were at. He would go meet them in their hurts. He would meet them in their pain, and he would be there with them. So we have to, if we can't understand what it's like to go through that for ourselves, we have to have a level of empathy to at least be there emotionally with our brothers and sisters. So I think that is going to be a big part of the healing process, is to just connect emotionally, connect with empathy, and be there. Like, there's been many times in my life where I've been hurting and I just need my friends to be there for me. I'm not looking for an answer. I'm not looking for them to fix it. I just need to know that I've got support. I need to know that I've got love. I need to know that I'm heard. And not to just let me sit in my heart and just stay there, but to give me a safe space where I can grow through. I can grow through there. So yeah, I think we do need to connect with our black community with empathy, connect with them emotionally, hear the hurts, and not try and fix anything, but let's look to the one who does have the answers so we can walk forward together. And like Pete says, hope. We need to know that in Christ, all things work together for the good for those who love him. So as we love God, as we come together as a family, whether we're black, white, whatever culture we come from, we come together as one family, and we look to the one who's brought us together. Jesus came to bring the world together, and in doing that, there will always be others who come against it, because truth does divide. Truth will always divide, because people don't want to believe it. They want to trust in their own opinions rather than the truth. But as we trust in God, the author and founder of our salvation, and meet each other where we're at, we can then come through it and be better for it, and pray that this Gen Z and the generations coming up won't have to go through the same stuff that our generations have had to go through. And that it will be a brighter future. There will be a more diverse future where we see all these amazing diverse cultures coming together and influencing one another for a better way. Like Pete said, I've been hugely blessed by my black family, who, since I met Grace and the black people in our church, by the level of honour. Like the Western culture, not just Britain, but the Western culture in many ways lacks honour. But the level of honour I have seen from a black community has blessed me and has helped me value honour even more, and that can only be a good thing. So we honour Christ and we honour one another because God made us all.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I'm just a bit conscious of the time here. Just before we break off, just want to say that one thing that you're clearly all saying in the last few sentences is that you're saying representation matters. Diversity, difference, that needs to be encouraged to move things forward. I also saw that the church Destiny Church is sort of modeling an interesting way of moving forward. Pastor Pete, you had a panel midweek last week where you gave your platform to young voices, different people from different countries to come forward and just talk about their experience. So you sort of opened and gave them the context to speak of their experiences and their past hurts. What was it important for you to do? How do you think that specific response has helped the current climate in your church, interacting with each other and discussing race?
Yeah. I mean, my heart behind that moment on the Facebook Live event I did was very simply to give a voice. And I think Andy, you just mentioned that one of the most important things just now is for the voice to be heard. And I knew I had heard their stories, and I was impacted by it. I was impacted by the things I'd heard from them, the pain they'd gone through, the anxiety they felt when they faced certain things or were treated in a certain way. But I knew that most people in our context didn't know those stories. So my heart was, I just want those stories to be heard. So that for me, that's what it's all about, just letting the stories be heard. And actually, there's been so many people who have actually, on the back of that clip, come back to me. And many pastors actually on the back of that clip have come to me and said, listen, Pete, I've had several pastors contact me say, that clip really helped me understand in a deeper way the issues. And it was very simply, all that was happening, as you know in the clip, was just people hearing their stories. And, you know, you can't walk in someone else's shoes, but if you hear their stories, you start to feel it. And when you feel it, then you can make an appropriate response. You're not just doing a response then because, it's the dumb thing to do. You're doing it because you're actually like, no, I'm moved by that. I've got to say something. Yeah.
So you really, it was a bit amplified people's voices where people would never have known. Now they know, they've had the chance to hear. So I thought that was a beautiful thing. So we're closing. I can see Micah there calling for his mommy. As we close, I'm just looking to hear from you, each of you, just lastly. In closing, just in a few words, how you'd like the church to move forward. Just in closing, what are your hopes for the church in moving forward as a UK church altogether? And us moving forward together as Black, as white, as Asian, what is your hope for us moving forward? What would you like to see? We'll start with you, Pete, and then we'll just go around.
So, I love the idea of international church. I see that in Revelation, that we're going to be from every nation, tribe. I see it at the beginning of the church at Pentecost. God chose to pour out His Spirit on an international crowd, and He gave us tongues, different languages. The word of God from the word go was proclaimed in multiplicity of languages. So from the word go, church has been an international thing. And for me, I look forward to just jumping into that even more in the days ahead. I'm looking forward to, so not just protesting against something, but positively shining for something. So letting the church becoming even more international diversity, shining, and talking about it more. I think this entire thing that's happened on earth in the last couple of weeks has been a very helpful conversation. People are talking about it more, people are more alert to it. And in the context of an international church, I can only see us celebrating more the internationalness, giving more voice to people from the different backgrounds, and yeah, just going large on that. So yeah, love it.
What about you, Bailey? What are your closing thoughts on moving forward as a church together? What would you like to see?
I would love to see the church being the voice of hope, but also
why don't you talk to us, Andy, in the meantime while Bailey comes back?
My hope for the church going forward from today is that we will fulfill the Great Commission. We will reach every nation, and we will make disciples by teaching them the Word of God. So as we teach the Word of God, we can then apply the Word of God, and we can live the Word of God, and that the church will be the shining light of hope that she's always been designed to be. And that every tribe and nation from all over the world will come together, worship Christ, and fulfill the purpose they were created for.
Wow. Great answer, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. And you, B? Let's have a moment.
I think just as Andy has said, I want to see the church as the voice of hope, that people going to the church to consult the church on all issues. I know at the moment, even just to go back to a point that Andy had made, that in the church, people are wanting to get their voices heard, but out with the church, for maybe those who don't have a church connection, they're wanting to get their voices heard, and they're creating committees, and they're saying who will go and represent us. And when I see them creating these communities and committees, they're creating committees and people in media, they're creating communities and people in education, but nobody has said who can we contact from the church to represent us in front of the government, in front of anyone, so that they can be the voice. So that's where I want the church to be in that sphere of influence, where the church is rightfully meant to be at the top of the sphere of influence, and to help move things forward, but also for that unity, the unity in the church and unity with people themselves, so that they can experience God's full love, that He did want us to have a relationship with one another, to have that relationship even with Him, but it can only begin when they accept Jesus in their heart, and it can only begin when they understand that. I love the interview Pete did. Somebody contacted me and had said it actually made them think about how they'd had an encounter, and she had never thought of herself as racist, but she let some comments go, some racist comments, and she had thought, what if they were talking about my friend B? Would I also be silent in that moment? And she actually cried. It made me cry, because I thought she was walking in my shoes, but she at the time was not in the position to speak up. But it's these conversations, and it's how we move forward from that to help people move forward too.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's all we had time for today. You've all been saved by Micah. I'm hoping to be the beginning of conversations, not just here, but everywhere across the UK, and everywhere that people are feeling a sense of despair and anger about racial injustice. So I'll just let you go, and hopefully you could join me for another discussion, maybe several weeks down the line. Everybody say yes, yes, yes. I like to get video confirmation for these things.